Right, YouTube, Shadow King Nazru, and is this camera set up right? I'm asking because I got a new chair, because the one I had before wasn't all that comfortable, and then it was also close to my birthday, which is coming up in 4 days. So, yeah, this was nice. I'm also going to be getting that laptop I've been constantly talking about. But anyway, moving on. I'm here to talk about a review for Records of Ragnarok. So, Record of Ragnarok is a anime that's being shown off by Netflix. Yes, the same Netflix that also did The Shame. Let's just call it that. If any of you been paying attention to Netflix, you know what I'm talking about. Uh, but let's not get into that, shall we? Anyway, it's an anime done by Netflix, and what its basic premise is that the gods are deciding whether or not they should let humans continue to exist, and the gods are pretty much just fed up with everything humanity does with war, pollution, murder, lying, just all the sinful deeds that they do. And they said, okay, we've had enough. It's time to end humanity. We don't want to let them live for another 1,000 years because they're not going to change. And you see a lot of these gods from their various myths and religions. There's Shiva, Aphrodite, Zeus. Funny enough, I did not expect the guy who turned out to be Zeus to actually be Zeus, because he looks like this anorexic old man, and that's not how Zeus is usually depicted. He's usually well built for his age, and actually has a full set of hair. And this guy has like a short kind of, I don't want to say mohawk, but it's a very like short bob of hair. Uh, but I figured that if that was Zeus, it was going to be they were going to do the Master Roshi thing where he seems old and decrepit, but he's actually can transform into like a more buff built version of himself. And well, I know they do that. It does take a lot of stuff from other animes like Dragon Ball, Attack on Titan, and so on and so forth. But going back to the story premise, it's basically the gods have had enough of humanity. They want to wipe them out. However, Brunhilde, who surprisingly enough they can't say her name correctly, they vouches for humanity and says that we should give them a chance. And what we're going to do is hold the Ragnarok, where it's not an apocalyptic event, or at least not in the traditional sense of it, but instead it's going to be a tournament between 13 humans and 13 gods. And if the humans should win, they'll get to live for another 1,000 years. And if not, then that's it. They're done. They wipe out, and the Earth starts over again without humanity. And you're saying in the back of your head, so if the humans do win, do they have to do this again the next 1,000 years, or will they have the chance to clean up their act? I imagine they would take that opportunity to clean up their act and actually just say, okay, humanity's changed, and I think we could this time we don't have to do a tournament. This set of 1,000 years, we'll just decide to spare them. But yeah, they decided to do that, and it's mostly out of comedic gesture because as you would expect, the gods are so powerful. They didn't think humanity stood any chance against them, and the whole thing was just like a comedic formality than an actual idea that they were willing to give it a shot. But they do it anyway, and so basically, Valkyrie Brunhilde. Since she's they established that she's half human and half god, which make her a demigod. She's the one who has to be responsible for collecting the human warriors, and she manages to do that by getting 13 fighters throughout history and religion who were great warriors and could have any chance of fighting the gods. And to give them an extra hand, they do this really interesting thing where where she gets her where Brunhilde gets her sisters, and they form a pact with the humans and turn into celestial weapons and bond with them, which would give the humans a equal footing with the gods. So it's not so much overpowering the humanity or the gods. It's all going to be based around skill. I mean, there's going to be powerhouses, but still, it's going to all be overall skill. And I felt that was a pretty good print. Now, the first few episodes where we get into the actual fight, that's when the problems with the show started to show up. So they do the tournament, and they have Heimdall announce Ragnarok, which does fall in line with Norse mythology, and despite the fact that Heimdall, instead of looking how he's depicted in actual myth, kind of looks like this wooden robot thing. I can't really describe it. But then again, it's an anime that's talking about saying that all the mythologies and religions exist, including the Christianity religion. So you gotta expect that they take liberties with these things. I mean, we should have expected that because they made they have Aphrodite being carried by these golems, and her breasts are ridiculously huge. Like, her breasts are the size of like a fat man's stomach, and she's beautiful. It's hilarious. And like Zeus is geriatric pervert, but that does make sense because that is kind of his character in actual mythology. But going back to the problems, the first fight is between Thor and Lubu. And Thor, I mean, he doesn't look how he usually does. He looks more like this 20-year-old pretty boy instead of the rugged, bearded redhead. I mean, he is a redhead, but he's not low. And Mjolnir, Thor's hammer, is massive. It's like bigger than he is. And he's able to lift it. And they also mentioned that he has those gauntlets that's supposed to help him with it, which was nice because that is what's actual myth. But they also kind of say that he doesn't need it. They're not actually meant to boost his strength. They're more to keep his strength in check. But it's whatever. The problem with this fight is that it's very, very slow. There's not a lot of actual fighting in it. And I mean, this is between two powerhouses. Granted, I don't know anything about Lubu, because I'm not all that big on Chinese mythology and history. But it's basically like the slow but powerful warriors, and it really does show that they're really slow in this thing, and it's really hurt by that. Every time they make an action or prepare for like a powerful attack, they'll either cut to the audience describing, "Oh, like, he's gonna do that thing. He's gonna, you see this? He's gonna do that thing. This is amazing. Remember that time he did that thing?" And they'll go into and they'll cut away to a backstory explaining both Thor and Lubu, why they're these great warriors, why everybody praises them. It's like, okay, we get it. They're great warriors. Can we please just continue this fight and actually have something interesting to look at? And you figure that they would just move along, but no. And guess how long this fight lasts? Like 3 to 4 episodes of just this slow fight, and it's dragging and it's bogged down with expositions and cutaway. You know how people criticize the old Dragon Ball Z for having cutaways and expositions and all these backstories, even things that weren't in the manga. all these problems that were happening before Dragon Ball Z Kai came in and cut out all that filler stuff and made it faster, more like the actual manga. Thank God for that. Um, it's like that, but worse. And I was like, oh man, I'm really gonna struggle getting through this, and I'm only doing this because I'm a mythology and religion fan. And I like to see adaptations of these kind of things. Uh, but yeah, the I did not care for the first fight. There was a lot of problems, and I kind of started to question with all these cutaways and all this stuff. Was that like that in the manga? Because if so, you maybe could have cut this out. I mean, I'm all for trying to make the source material as faithful as possible, but within reason sometimes. Because sometimes things don't work out in a visual media that's in motion. And and also you could have cut these things down just like to build the pace up better. But then we get into the second fight, which that's the funny thing about this second fight. So all the gods and the humans were pumped up because of the first fight, for whatever reason. And Shiva wants to fight the next contendant, who it turns out to be Adam. Yes, Adam from the Bible. Like I said, Christianity does exist, and he wants to fight Adam because he's all pumped because he's starting to see the potential of humans, and he really wants to get his blood boiling. But then Zeus, in his decrepit old form, stops Shiva, grabs him by the shoulder, and says, "This round is mine." And it's like, and Shiva's like just trying to tell him off, but then Zeus gives him like the death grip. I mean, he doesn't kill him, but he just grabs him on the shoulder and really painfully like say, "This fight is mine." And like I was like, "Okay, Gramps, I don't want any trouble." It was pretty funny. And then they get into this with the whole introduction of Adam and Zeus, basically explaining their story. And this one is handled much better. I mean, there's not a lot of. I mean, for one, there's a lot more action, and the cutaways have been cut back, and it's only when we actually need it. And I will admit that I was more invested in this slightly because I'm biased in favor of Adam because, well, I'm a Christian, and I was going to be naturally rooting for Adam. But it's also the fact that they did an interesting thing with his character, where they say he hates the gods, but Zeus says, "Okay, I hear that you hate the gods, but I don't see any resentment in your eyes." And Adam says, "It doesn't matter. I mean, I'm not fighting out of hatred or resentment. I'm fighting to protect my children." And it's really, really touching because you got to remember, Adam was the first man. He's the father of humanity, and even in the anime, all the people are touched by this. That the first man, their father, is fighting for his life to protect humanity, and that's really interesting. And oh yeah, there's also about this stake that a lot of these humans that fought, some of them have died and gone to heaven and are brought back for this tournament. It turns out that if either a god or a human should die, because yeah, these things are a fight to the death, is that this destroys both the body and the soul, and thus they don't come back to heaven. They just like cease to exist or something. So yeah, that's kind of dark. And the fight between Zeus and Adam is really interesting. Zeus, surprisingly enough, doesn't use his thunderbolts like you thought he was, since he's the thunder god and supreme god of Mount Olympus. Though they oddly enough call him the the godfather of the cosmos or something along those lines. And they try to make it seem like he's like the most powerful god out of all of them, despite the fact that the Christian God exists, and canonically the Christian God is more powerful than any god from any religion. I'm sorry this review is kind of scatterbrained. It's just I have a lot to talk about. But yeah, Zeus decides that he's just going to rely on his on brute force and on his fists and kicks, and he's pretty, and like the typical anime thing to do with the old man, where they seem old but they're very strong and agile for their age. That's pretty much the case with Zeus. And what gives Adam the fair advantage is that he's not only has the celestial weapon, which it turns out to be like a brass knuckle from the one of the Valkyries. He also, because he was made in God's image, he's able to emulate all the God's abilities, and they call it divine reflection. I thought, oh yeah, so he's basically like a copycat fighter, and I thought that was pretty cool. And and it's really interesting how Adam was able to perceive and dodge Zeus's attack. You almost think he's like Goku, and he has Ultra Instinct, and he's dodging it. It's all very instinctual. It really did feel like, I even made that joke that, oh yeah, Adam has Ultra Instinct. And it was really, I would say that's arguably the best fight of this season, because of how I was paced, we only get like 3 fights this season, which I would have preferred if they got more, especially to help make up for that awful first fight. But yeah, so they all keep getting a bit impressed by how well Adam is doing, and even Zeus does it, and it keeps going. But Zeus decides to take on his final form. He has to even say he has a final form, and it's more like a slender thing. Think of like how it was for like Frieza and Majin Buu, where they start off with his body that's not well fit for fighting, then they get bulky and more ridiculous, and then their final form is more lean. That's what it was, and Adam is kind of struggling because he's been using divine reflection for so long that it's starting to damage his nervous system, but he keeps on going. And ultimately the fight ends with Adam dying and Zeus like being virtually worn out. Like, and it's a real shame because we were all rooting for Adam because we really did like him. They even did this, especially after this one bit where they did their own interpretation of the fall of man. It turns out that in this anime, Eve didn't partake of the fruit, and it was the serpent, who I would assume is just another form of Lucifer, tried to rape Eve, but she got away. So what Lucifer, I'm assuming this is Lucifer for the sake of argument, decides to do is frame Eve by eating the forbidden fruit, and pretty much telling the other gods that she did that, and she has to be cast out of the Garden of Eden. And what Adam does is that he says that if Eve's going to be exiled from the Garden of Eden, then I'm going to eat the forbidden fruit and be exiled too. But first, I'm going to punish the serpent by destroying his limbs and killing him too. So yeah, that was pretty awesome. And it was a real shame that we lost such a great character. But it did kind of inspire humanity and united them. And Adam also gained the respect of the gods. So slowly the gods are starting to appreciate humanity a bit more, even if they have their gripes with them. And the third fight is between Poseidon, the Greek god of the seas, and some guy named Sasaki Kojiro, or Kojiro Sasaki. I don't know which one's the first name or the last name. In Japan, they switched them. They switched it. You say the last name first. So it's probably Kojiro Sasaki or Sakiki or whatever. Um, and he's basically like the old great swordsman, who basically has this interesting story where he was this swordsman who didn't really didn't really fight, and whenever he kind of did, he would surrender, but he was always trained to better himself. And whenever he did train himself, and the people who fought him wanted a rematch, and for some reason they established like they could sense how far he's gotten, and they could sense that if they actually fought him, they would lose, and they surrender. So he's like called the greatest loser, and it's kind of funny that way. Wait, but it was a pretty interesting and kind of fun backstory. I mean, it wasn't as cool as Adam, but still good. Poseidon, though, is different. He looks like this. He doesn't sound look like a man who's in his 30s and 40s and jacked and regal. Uh, Poseidon in this one looks more like he's like this 20-year-old short-haired blonde pretty boy, and he does like to show off his muscles a bit. Uh, but he's just a dick. He's just a complete dick. He's looking down on everybody, both man and God. He just says, ugh, he disgusts me. And like, they even go into this one backstory where they say that there was this 13th Olympian named Adamus or something, and yeah, completely made up, and how he was supposed to be the supreme ruler of Olympus. That's kind of taken away from the Hades storyline, where originally Hades was supposed to be the supreme ruler of Olympus because he was the eldest brother, but Zeus and Poseidon and Hades drew sticks, and depending on on what kind of state they got, they inherited either the heavens, the seas, or the underworld, and that's how that goes. But they're borrowing for that, and Adamus is pissed off that he got the short end of the stick, and he wants to rebel against Zeus, and he's gathering all the gods to support him, and he asks Poseidon to help, and Poseidon's like, he's just looking down on him, and he says, a god doesn't need help. We are, from the beginning, we are perfection. We should stand on our own, and blah, blah, blah. And he ultimately ends up killing him out of spite. And I'm saying this, that we don't need this. This doesn't really add anything. All it established that Poseidon was this condescending, egotistical dick. And we already knew that just by his interaction with the crowd for the first few minutes of meeting him. So that didn't do anything. And much like with Zeus, Poseidon doesn't use the godly powers that you expect him to. Like, he doesn't use the seas. Zeus doesn't use his thunderbolts. I mean, the only one who used actual powers that you would think would be associated with them was Thor, because he did actually use Mjolnir and used some electric powers. Poseidon just uses his strength and his agility and his trident against Kojiro. And meanwhile, Kojiro is trying to think in his mind. He's basically using image training and fighting simulations in his head to fight Poseidon, and he's coming we're coming up with almost 200 scenarios of how to fight Poseidon, and they all virtually end up with his death, and he wants to surrender just because he feels like it's hopeless, but he knows what the stakes are, and he knows that he can't surrender, so he has to give it his all, and it's very back and forth between the two, despite the fact that Poseidon doesn't really respect anyone. Kojiro does get him to look at him into the eye, and he feels like, now you're just taking me seriously. And ultimately it ends with Kojiro using a sword technique that he's been perfecting over the course of his life and in the afterlife. And he uses this technique to to cut up Poseidon. And yeah, this was pretty good. I do think that the last two fights were better than the first one. If you can endure the Thor versus Lubu thing, I think you will enjoy the rest of the anime. And they teased off that the next matchup is between Jack the Ripper versus Heracles, or as they call him, Hercules, because that's the Roman name for Heracles. And that's always the more popular choice, so we always just call him Hercules instead of his actual Greek name, Heracles. And I was wondering, like, how's this matchup going to work? Because Hercules is known for being the honorable, strong guy, sometimes even argued to be physically stronger than Zeus or any of the other Greek gods. But then I thought about it more, and this could actually work because Jack the Ripper is supposed to represent like the worst of humanity. He's going to be shady, very sneaky, going to use a lot of deception and cheating because that's his role. And they also brought them into like a Victorian London for this fight. So yeah, he's going to be tricking Hercules, which would make sense because Hercules is not exactly known for his intelligence. I'm not saying he's stupid, but he's not exactly bright either. So this could be an interesting fight, and especially since we have a god that's normally seen as heroic by most standards, even if he can be kind of a dick at times, versus Jack the Ripper, one of humanity's worst products. So yeah, I am kind of looking forward to that fight. All in all, the first few episodes of the first fight were a chore to get through. A chore to get through. But the second two fights made up for it, and I feel that the characters are cool and interesting enough for me to continue watching. And you will get to see a lot of nods to a lot of the mythologies and a lot of popular anime like Dragon Ball, Attack on Titan, Saint Seiya, and so many other things. So I feel like if you're like a big anime fan, and if you're like accustomed like how like the slow fight animes go, you'll probably get some enjoyment out of this when they pick up the pace. And if you're like a mythology fan, you'll enjoy seeing all these gods interacting with each other and getting these references. I mean, you also got some pretty good actors like Ben Diskin and I'm sorry, but he was the only voice actor I noticed. I thought I recognized some other voice actors, like I thought Grey DeLisle or Kari Walgren was in this, but it turns out it's not them. It's just some actors that sounded a lot like them, and a lot of these other actors I've never heard of. But all in all, I will say I do recommend this anime. But if you really just want to be fully entertained and don't want to go through a chore, you can skip the first fight and just say you recognize that Lubu lost, and just get to the Adam versus Zeus fight. But yeah, I will say this was a good anime. I'm looking forward to watching season 2. You guys tell me, are you big fans of mythologies and religion and anime? Well, I imagine you are a fan of anime because you're watching my channel, and that's what I cover a lot of the time. You guys tell me, what did you think of this anime? Did you like it? Does it seem like something you would go to, or do you think it's has too many issues for you to get invested into it? Let me know in the comment section down below. I'll catch you mortals later.